This is called The Next 100 Years. The next 100 years. And it's sort of, I think it's sort of like a postscript to all the other stuff that I've been doing. This is called Sheep May Safely Graze. It's a Bach piece. And I think I just posted a video of our sheep grazing on May 10th. All right. So, as usual, I'm going to ramble and then I'm going to play some other pieces that have been put out by people like Spencer Pratt, AOC, some random woman talking about 30,000 layoffs at Oracle, and then I'm going to fill in the blanks. Now, so I'm going to wear the Palantir hat for this reason. The most destructive thing that Palantir does, other than create kill chains, is to let you know that you may never safely graze. You can't have sex with your lover without your phone listening to you. You can't open up your iPhone without it looking in your eyes. And, right, the eyes are the window to the soul, right? You sit with somebody and have a drink and you look in each other's eyes. And no matter what you're saying, you're really watching the other person's eyes. So our technology now is the great eye in the sky, is going to watch us at all times. And they want you to know that you're forever under the eye of a predator. So this this nation of America's really very much just like Rome, a nation completely, its entire history is warfare. There's really not a lot to talk about Rome other than warfare. It's like culturally, they have some plays in the Colosseum and some cool books and shit, but you can really read all their culture in about, you could study it all. And I mean, somebody's going to reach out to me and say, no, but war is the father of all. And we are in this war at the end of 25 years of the war on terror. The war with Iran appears to ending like all the other, let's call them battles. Afghanistan was a battle. Libya was a battle. Syria is a battle. Syria is now run by Al-Qaeda. Iraq was a battle. You got the joke. That we sort of half won the battles and half won the war. And I think that that was the plan. None of these things that have happened in the last 25 years are to produce a result of like Germany and Japan or even the Mexican War, where we get California. The wars of the last 25 years have just been to create war so that sheep may never safely graze. So you always know you're under surveillance. The threat of the price of oil and the price of food at any minute could explode. You're never allowed to relax. So, okay, that's enough of that with the hat. So this is a rambling thought of like what the next 100 years may look like from a guy that has, I'm pretty well versed in things like intellectual history and military history. I can hang. And the war between Trump, Israel, Iran, however you want to look at it, I think there's a war on top of that. There's a agenda on top of that to mow the grass. Pun intended. What do you mean? Well, that's what the Israelis say about the Palestinians, isn't it? So there's now a new pandemic. There's the hantavirus. There's the COVID shots. There's student loans. It just goes on and fucking on and on, right? So that sheep may never graze. And probably the reason for this is they're dividing up the world's natural resources differently. And in his defense, Trump is sort of semi-nationalistic in like seizing Venezuela or something like that. I think he's working for Mrs. Rothschild. I think he's basically like his Secretary of Commerce. I always forget his name. They all work for the Rothschilds people. You have to understand that, like, the way finance really works is finance isn't really like this, like you think it is. It's a great book by this woman is like, this is like Hemingway writing style. This is like, I'm like 100 pages into it. Like, that's what everybody thinks capitalism is, but that's not how our system works. Our system is not capital like him. He bought a farm when he was like 15 years old from having 3 paper routes in Washington, D.C. when his father was a congressman. Our system's based on credit, which means somebody owes somebody. Feeling me? We're not all partners in this. There's not really very much that's equitable in our system at all. Everything is about credit. Like in finance, everything is about, do you have access to credit? Can you get capital? Even if you get capital, which is a form of can be a form of equity, and you have to answer to somebody, that's a problem in itself. But debt always means there's some subservience. So the next 100 years, we're just going to ramble here, folks, and listen to the sheep outside. And I don't think that this is what the next 100 years looks like. I think as you read this book and you're like, well, this is what American capitalism is supposed to be. And then there's all these white men. The subtitle of this, I think, is going to be, the next 100 years, white people versus the brown girl, white men versus the brown girls, or something ridiculous like that, because I like to, mix it up a little bit. I don't think this has anything to do with the next 100 years. Okay. Spoiler alert. Know that during the great financial crisis, I think he had to testify in front of Congress or in front of like the Senate Banking Committee or something like that. And he walked in and said, I'm not responsible for the fact that I own and control Moody's. Moody's is the rating organization, one of the 3 big rating organizations that rated all the mortgage sausage AAA when 7% of it was diseased cattle. He walked in and he said, I own Philip Morris. I'm not responsible for all the people that smoke themselves to death. And this is why white men are not the next 100 years. They don't believe in anything. They don't believe in anything. White men don't believe in anything anymore. Oh, yes, they do. They're Judeo-Christians and blah. They don't fucking believe in anything anymore. They've been trained that the only thing that matters is money. And that has a long history. Calvinism, predestination, Augustine, that's a whole nother Guinness. But all they believe in is money, and money is power, and power is what you can get away with. And if we have to move some natural gas around the Mediterranean, the people of Gaza are just in the way. And the unfortunate thing is where we are right now, because I'm going to play a couple different skits for you, and some of you who are new to the Bruno vibe are going to be like, is this guy conservative? Or I don't give a fuck about that. That Mickey Mouse fucking cable TV, boys versus the girls. I like to call it the America's national lobotomy. You can't run a nation just on money. If you haven't seen it, there's this gentleman, Alon Mizrahi, who does a great analysis right now of Iran. At the end of it, he says, what Americans don't understand, what white men don't understand, is the rest of the world doesn't just operate on money. There's things more important to them on money. And it's Mother's Day, so we're going to throw a couple of curves that way too. Because men and women do see the world differently, just like the two lobes of your brain see the world differently. And they have to communicate with each other. If they lobotomize you, and this is the case with America, the two sides don't talk to each other anymore. Yeah, Calvinism is that's a whole. I I've done so many hours of this on Sunday talking about theology and the deep background and a sort of a big "What's your Roman Empire" thing. I actually wanted to get away from that and like say, what does the next 100 years look like? So all in all, white men, both Jewish and Christian, are I don't know, 8% of the world's population or something like that. And they think that the way that they're going to continue to maintain their position isn't to do the things that got them to that position. It's just to terrorize, bomb, rape, violate, and use different kinds of monetary extortion to deal with the other 7 billion people on the planet. That's not going to work. So my deep source, I like to reveal my sources on this, is Oswald Spengler, who, if you read his book, The Decline of the West, it's this weird jumping back and forth of describing European or Western civilization, which he explains early on as Christian civilization. You know, there's this whole movement in America to say that the Noahide laws, the Talmud, is the basis of Western civilization. If you know, you know. He does a nice job of jumping back and forth and explaining why Europeans became so dominant, that they have certain ideas about things that made them dominant. But in the end, it was just mechanized warfare. And now we do not have a monopoly on mechanized warfare. And what you've seen in the last 6 weeks, other than the Japanese beating the Russians in, I think, 1901 or some shit like that, or the stalemate that was Vietnam, you've never really seen non-European people be completely outgunned by, no, sorry, you've not seen European society, America, be outgunned by non-Europeans. And that just happened in the last 6 weeks. I'm 50-50 that it's not an accident, that the people who actually run the world, who run the financial system, are just squashing America back into its place. So this is why there's no resolution to what's going. This is why it's just this like tit for tat Mexican standoff. I'll blow up some of your ships, you'll blow up some. It actually seems like the purpose of this is just to destroy the world's natural resources delivery system, which a fifth of which goes through the Straits of Hormuz. It seems like that's the goal. I'm not absolutely sure about that. But the weird people who run the universe, who base it on credit, it's not capitalism, it's credit. There's a difference. There's a difference between debt and equity. They're resetting the system. They're resetting the debt-based system. If this is true, they're resetting the debt-based system by, if there's $40 trillion worth of debt, of U.S. government debt, it's about $105 trillion in the United States. What they're just going to do is inflate everything to just quadruple everything. Like, you'll go to Denny's for like the big all American slam breakfast or whatever it's called, and it'll be $100. Follow me? It's sort of an intuitive thing. Nobody in finance talks about this, that the prices are just, the debt's growing at 7 or 8%. But really, what if this outcome in Iran was just to fucking blow everything up? They want that inflation to be running at 20, 30, and 40% globally. In America, because we have so many natural resources, it might be high single digits, but we're just going to like inflate the debt away by strangling the rest of the world's access to natural resources. Musical interlude. You know, we've heard that song like in a lot of movies, like at the end of the romantic comedy when they finally do get married and he doesn't run off with his secretary, and she fell in the lake and they got her out and got her a new dress, and then they get married and they play this song. Isn't it weird that like this glorious, Bach piece is about sheep just grazing? We'll get back to that in a little bit. So I'm going to play you some stuff that is on Substack and other places on the internet that sort of triggered me to make this piece. And what I want to get across is ideologies are over. Get over your ideology, get over your political party. Remember, if something happened to Trump and then JD, of course, is just Peter Thiel's boy, the next guy in line is Senator Grassley, who's 92 fucking years old. It's like the end of the Soviet Union. We have old people and assholes, all of which are white men, running the show. Well, officially running the show. We don't even really know who runs the show. It's Mrs. Rothschild or some shit like that. So let's go through a couple of these of like a little window into what the next 100 years may look like. And this is not really like what does China look like in 100 years or that kind of thing. I don't think I really have any in place to say. This is specifically for the West, North Americans primarily, but to some degree Europeans. So on Mother's Day, so this was on Substack. This caught my eye. I wonder what women would do if they had 80% of the wealth in the world and felt that they could get away with anything. And someone who looks like it's called Healing Trauma Now. He looks like I think it's a trans person. Let's be real. If women had 80% of the world's wealth, we'd be building schools, not sex trafficking islands. We'd fund healthcare, childcare, housing, mental health, climate solutions, community safety, and education. We'd be feeding people, not exploiting children. Matriarchal societies like the Muso, the Minangkabau, Akan, Kazi, Breviary show people doesn't have to mean abuse. Patriarchy isn't just oppressive, it's pathological. All right, so there's a starting point. Just a quickie. Back in the 1960s, around the time of Vatican II, which is the early 60s, when we had a Catholic president, I just like to throw that in there. We had about 250,000 nuns in the United States. I think it's now about 5% of that. So there's no real. We have feminism, we have progressivism, but to their point, I would suggest that women have less capital. And I'm using that word very specifically. What do you mean capital? You know what I mean by this. Money, a certain place in the world that's just theirs, not like Kamala Harris, like she has to buy her way in or wrestle her way in. She's just somehow there, right? Like even stay-at-home moms like had a little bit of something, and all that has been sold off so that women can go into the workforce. So now women are just cogs in the machine like men are. So we don't really have any women. To this point of this quote, we don't really have any women that like have their own capital, a capital that isn't steered by an agenda. Well, some of you will say, well, the Catholic Church is an agenda. I would say, yeah, but it's mythological, so who cares? You had like whole hospitals and universities and parochial schools, etc. When I look, because we're going to get to Spencer Pratt in Los Angeles, and he's going to talk about homelessness and drugs and so forth. When I look at homelessness, and I've spent a lot of time in California, and like you, I've seen it on social media and the fentanyl and the whole thing. I saw a guy slit his wrist on the sidewalk walking through San Francisco. And it looks just like you'd think it would look. It's just blood everywhere. And the other homeless people tried to come rescue him, and I don't think he made it. When I looked at that, it was like a lack of the feminine. What? In other words, just sending cops down the street and hitting people over the head, that's not going to deal with that problem. I'm not talking about the bloodletting. I'm talking about just the homelessness. That there is something feminine in our culture that's missing. Of someone saying like, you all right? Like, there's either the people on the left ignore them and say, well, they're free to do their drugs on the thing. They're free to shit on the sidewalk. They're free in this kind of brain dead. They've turned off like the feminine urge, which even men have, of course, to say like, no, we gotta fucking do something about it. They've turned that off into like the progressive California thing that just says, well, that's not my problem. They're free to live like that, and it's all because of the patriarchy. See where I'm going with this? They're not there anymore. The feminine isn't there anymore. It's been neutralized. All right, so here's another woman. Every time I see these headlines, I get this sense of like, holy fuck, there is such a massive opportunity for someone to build some sort of new capital thingy to take all these people. I'm not going to make all these people nuns. That's not what I mean. But there's such an opportunity to take all these very educated, productive people and like steer them. I'm not saying that they have to go clean up the fentanyl users. I just mean there's all these, and everybody thinks they're going to get replaced by AI. So we'll think about that. Again, this is what does the next 100 years look like? But let's just go back. Let's all calm down.
Okay. And one day via email.
30,000 laid off in one day.
Now those 30,000 jobs are going to be done with AI. Provided through a data center that has devastated rural areas, and is devastating the environment, consuming as much resources as a city. And in that data center, there's 1 to 50 employees is the statistic on how many actual human beings will work in these data centers that are taking the same amount of resources as like freaking New York City and decimating our open spaces. And now 30,000 people got laid off yesterday by a corporation that's worth billions of dollars with C-suite positions that, you know, make millions and millions and millions of dollars a year. And they get all the tax incentives. They get all the government support. And as a small business owner, I can't believe all of it. And then I have people trying to tell me AI is unstoppable. AI is going to change the world and help humanity. No, it isn't. AI is going to make human beings obsolete and a handful of dudes richer than anyone can fathom, with no plan. And now we have a president who has blocked any form of regulation, any form of guardrails, just letting AI companies run amok, destroy our economy, destroy our planet, and threaten the survival of the human species, not only with the decimation of the planet, but through the potential for AI harnessing weapons of mass destruction without human interference. And I'm the radical that people are mad at all over the place. I'm the radical. I'm the radical that suggests that, maybe there should be a group of ethical people without conflicts of interest agreeing on limitations to this crap. That maybe corporations should be held in check. That maybe we should have a backup plan when human beings aren't going to have jobs. That maybe we should listen to the scientists and scholars that have the expertise to understand what the long-term implications of all this are. I'm the radical one.
So what's interesting about that to me, that's a very feminine approach to the situation, where the order of the day isn't just to spout off your corporate MSNBC bullshit about your plan to cool the oceans or something. This is just this is what's happening. What is happening? My friend loves to say, what is happening? And just see it for what it is. Men always want to turn everything into ESPN, and we should have played this, and fourth down, we should have done this. That's how men are wired, right? They're not very good at sitting back and being like, why should a 18-year-old make $9 million throwing a fucking football at Ohio State? Is that really the right thing to do? So I enjoyed that. Now let's swing the dick back the other way. Sometimes a little bit of levity, helps your brain reset. It's like sherbet, like at a fancy restaurant, you have a little sherbet. So Spencer Pratt, is it Platt or Pratt? Pratt is doing really well in California, and I've watched some of his stuff, and people have been telling me about it, so I've kept my eye on it. And I guess he's like a B actor or something, and his place was burnt down, and he lives in an Airstream trailer. And I'm going to suggest that this is a very masculine view. My point to you is neither of these are right or wrong, and the way they control us right now is back to the national lobotomy. So they think that this guy is in opposition to the woman who just spoke.
Karen Basura is a communist. Now, when I was 19, 20, I was living in an apartment on Skid Row, getting my political science degree at USC. That's as LA as it gets, dude. But do you know what Karen Basura was doing at that age? You guessed it, going to Cuba to support the communist revolution and Fidel Castro's oppressive regime. What? Karen Basura is a card-carrying member of the Communist Front Group, the Venceremos Brigade, an anti-American communist solidarity organization in which she actively worked for years to undermine the U.S. and prop up the communist revolution in Cuba. Does this sound normal to you? Who in the heck spends their 20s supporting a violent communist dictatorship in a foreign country? What were you doing at 19 years old? Some reports have shown that Karen Masura's communist organization was actually involved in intelligence training ops on behalf of the Cuban regime, and some of the members actually bombed the U.S. Capitol in 1983. There's a legitimate possibility that Karen Basura is a literal communist spy, which actually might explain why such an experienced politician has been so effective at destroying America's greatest city in just a few short years. Well, now you know what her experience is. Some of you may not remember, but she was actually the front runner to become Joe Biden's VP pick for 2020. But that went up in flames almost immediately once people dug up her commie past and saw her foreign sympathies in statements following Fidel Castro's death when she called it a great loss. She used to refer to Castro as Comandante en Jefe. And for those of you who don't habla español, that means commander-in-chief. Now, I don't know about you, but the president of the United States is always my commander-in-chief. But not Karen Basura. Her commander-in-chief is the communist dictator of Cuba. Right now, Cuba's in the news because the oppressed people who have suffered under the horrific communist regime are rising up to fight for freedom. You'll notice how much Latino immigrants, and especially Cuban immigrants, hate communism because they know firsthand how evil communism is. They have experienced the empty store shelves, the decrepit infrastructure, the choking censorship and surveillance, the secret police thugs, the death and destruction that Fidel Castro and other commie dictators ushered in. Communism is responsible for more mass death in just the last century than anything else in the history of the world. Over 100 million people have been killed by communist regimes in China, Cambodia, the Soviet Union, from forced famines, purges, gulags. Communism is an evil, anti-human ideology dressed up as some idealistic form of equity and fairness, and yet somehow it always ends up with millions of people dying in forced labor camps or starving to death. Communism is just a religion of malcontents, where instead of worshiping a righteous God, they worship the state. And whatever the state says, goes. We don't learn enough about the evil scourge on our planet, and communism is genuinely evil. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It preys upon the malcontents of society to fuel the revolution. But America never fell victim to this ideology. We didn't have enough malcontents to fuel the revolution in America. You had the ability to actually work your way into the American dream. You could buy a home, have your own slice of American soil, raise a family, speak freely, worship freely. But now, as that gets more and more out of reach for young Americans, and especially young Californians and Angelenos, there's a growing population of malcontents, angry, jaded, cynical, and that is exactly the fertilizer that communists like Karen Basura use to seed the revolution. Notice how the riots are increasing, burning cars, smashing businesses, looting, stopping the freeway, attacking police officers. You all can see communism starting to take root because lifelong communists like Karen Basura have made life harder and harder here, and that is on purpose. Well, guess what, Karen? This ain't your Cuban commie kibbutz you're running. This is Los Angeles. This is America. I still believe in the American dream, and I'm not going to let you turn LA into your tribute to your Comandante en Jefe, Fidel Castro. Our Latino brothers and sisters have seen the evils of communism, and they are done with it. So let me help you out, Karen. I'll take your job, and you can go retire in Havana. We are going to restore the dream that Los Angeles used to be. Go to mayorpratt.com and donate. Support my campaign. And unlike the communists like Karen who want to take your money, I want to earn your money. And I will make it my life's mission to earn your support as mayor of Los Angeles.
Solid. So, as you're going to see tonight, a lot of people, because I'm going to play AOC next. I think I'm going to play AOC next. Yeah, I'm going to play AOC next. And you're going to be like, well, you're just trying to like have it both ways. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is this is what the next 100 years looks like. Not 10 years, not 10 months, not the next news cycle, not the next fucking election. The next 100 years. in the West. It's not going to look like this in Russia and China. They don't have this prop. Well, they're authoritarian. Their societies are collapsing. Putin's arm doesn't even swing properly. Like all this fucking propaganda. Putin just took on NATO and held his own. Iran just held its own against NATO. China, like, isn't even in the war, and every single time a missile flies, China becomes more powerful. Well, no, because we're strangling their oil. It's my point, people. What's the next 100 years look like? I could drive to Pittsburgh and jump on a plane and fly to Dubai 2 months ago. You want to fly to fucking Dubai today? The UAE is over. It's over. It used to be basically an Anglo-American colony. It's gone. It's gone. It's very possible Kuwait and Bahrain and Qatar are going to follow. I mean, this is literally, I'm not just doing this for like Sunday night hyperbolic, like, trying to get more people to subscribe. This is the biggest military. Let me be sure I want to say this. I think if you went back and you looked at Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Midway, you could look back and say, how did the Japanese think that they were going to beat the United States? They didn't even have access to oil. Okay. You could go back and say, like, Hitler at Stalingrad. He made the exact same mistakes as Napoleon and met General Winter. You could go back and say that they just played out a thing that was just going to run that way no matter what. This thing in Iran didn't have to happen. Right? Anybody's ever played a sport or boxed or wrestled or gotten a fist fight or anything. Fighting isn't just about throwing as much violence in one direction as possible. Right? Any sophistication on the other side knows how to deal with that. Remember, Iranians their national sport is wrestling. Not chicken sandwiches and college football, but wrestling. I would suggest for Americans, you need to really think differently about things like money. All the money my lifetime. So I was born roughly the time we went off the gold standard. And even then we went on to the petrodollar standard, where all the money out of the Persian Gulf and Saudi Arabia is recycled into dollars. So it wasn't our oil, but it was pretty much the same thing. The oil came out of the ground and went into dollars, and the dollars went to New York. That's over. And it's never coming back. So what does the next 100 years look like? I'm not going to give away the thesis till the end. So this is AOC. Mr. Snerdley cannot be with us tonight, so I'm with my extravagant production facilities holding up my iPad. I guess we're gonna have to run back that ass up, aren't we?
And Fidel Castro's oppressive regime? What? Karen Masura is a card-carrying member of the Communist Front Group, the Venceremos Brigade, an anti-American communist solidarity organization.
Okay. Oh, it's because that's a screenshot. That's not a video. That's a screenshot. So you can't tap on it and turn.
Organization in which she actively worked for years to undermine the U.S. and prop up the communist revolution in Cuba? Does this sound
So AOC spoke with David Axelrod, who's some sort of fake agent for some.
Yeah.
What say you about all of this?
It's funny because
Thank you, Mr.
in this
Snerdley.
op-ed that Jeff Bezos paid for in the Washington Post, there was this line that you had mentioned earlier about, well, as a potential 2028 contender, XYZ. And in the context of that, it was very clear this was a veiled threat, right? So it's the elite saying, if you want this job, you just stepped out of line. And we want you to know where the real power is. And it's in the modern day barons who own the post and own the algorithms, and we'll make an example out of you. And what's funny about that is that they assume that my ambition is positional. They assume that my ambition is a title or a seat. And my ambition is way bigger than that. My ambition is to change this country. Presidents come and go. Senate, House seats, elected officials come and go. But single payer healthcare is forever. A living wage is forever. Workers' rights are forever. Women's rights, all of that. And so, anyways, the way, but to a finer point to your question is that when you aren't attached, right? When you haven't been like fantasizing about being this or that since the time you were 7 years old, it is tremendously liberating because I get to wake up every day and say, how am I going to meet the moment?
Okay. Hold the thought. And the exhaustive preparation I've done for this, I forgot to go get my book across the room. And this little doodad that nobody knows this name, H.L. Mencken, he's sort of a lost writer and thinker and so forth he didn't do great first of all, he was dead in the second half of the 20th century, but he was against the intervention of World War I. And then, of course, when World War II came along, it pretty much destroyed his career. I will tell you that there's very few writers that when I read, I like stop reading and laugh like I'm listening to Tim Dillon, but he's one of them. And I know the punchline to this, but I'm just going to give it a quick look and see if I can find it. Somewhere in here it says, and he called FDR the Fuhrer, like it just absolutely hilarious shit. But anyways, give me just a second. Somewhere in there, he has an essay, relatively short, on what he believes is the most significant thing that led to the rise of, let's call, Western or European civilization. And like this guy, he said it's the accumulation of capital. Now, Linda, most of us in 2026 would say, well, you mean like Warren Buffett capital, like the stock market going up. And in the essay, he's like, no. back to the beginning of this whenever I said America used to have 250,000 nuns. We don't have 250,000 nuns anymore. Well, who cares? Who the fuck needs nuns? Like, well, you have women married to Christ, in uniform, taking vows of chastity, obedience, and poverty, and devoting their life to their fellow man. We don't have those anymore. In other words, that's like a form of capital. See where I'm going with this? Universities. AI is wiping out universities, especially small liberal arts colleges. They're being blown apart like apartment buildings in Gaza. It's not, I'm not saying that like it's somebody's fault. I'm just saying this is what is happening. This is what is happening. But the accumulation of capital in all of its forms is something that Westerners have to stop and realize it's been extracted and it's being pissed away. And what I find, and this is why I think we have 100 years to have this all play, at least maybe 1,000 years, have this all play out, is white male conservative Christians, as we call them in America, their policies, these conservative policies, have wiped out our capital. What? What do you mean wiped out? No. Remember, even in finance, right? It's if I remember right, it's assets minus liabilities equal the net worth. So when our growth is really comes from debt. It's credit. So we forever grow. Remember, Trump came in and ran the deficit from 5% to 7%. I just heard somebody on the radio driving back from Pittsburgh today, and he was like, yeah, and all these taxes are going to go up, and the big, beautiful bill put more money in people's pockets. But see, none of anything that goes on in the American conversation has anything to do with real capital. In other words, one of my sons had a girlfriend who trained to be a nurse, and the day she finished, she had $156,000 in debt. Now, she's going to make way more than she'll make that back in 2 years, but not net, right? It'll take her 20, 30 years to make that back. But let's throw the money out the window. Why make a 24-year-old girl take on $153,000 debt to make something, a nurse, which we vitally need? Because the system is not about capital. It's not about growth of the economy or human well-being. It's about extraction. It's like a kind of self-colonization, a kind of like imperialism of our own country. It's the Confederacy. What? Yeah. They wanted the whole fucking shooting match, people. The Nebraska Act broke apart the Missouri Compromise because they wanted the whole fucking thing. No, it was about states' rights. Bullshit. You're living through I've said it for 5 years. It's sort of my central thesis that we've never really gotten out of the Civil War. They just gerrymandered the Memphis Black District off the fucking map. And my point is, we're going away from a accumulation of capital kind of a thing to the devil take the hindmost, turning America into the antebellum South, where it's just going to be who extracts whatever they want to extract, and that's it. You do the Civil War thing in your own mind, and you go, well, it was about slavery. No, it wasn't. 70% of Northern whites didn't give a shit about slavery one way or the other. I mean, they probably had some moral conundrums with it, like, a lot of things. But they knew that the real threat that probably got them up in the morning to put a uniform on and march in formation while 50 caliber balls are flying at you was because they were going to take over the Midwest and then take over the whole fucking country, which is now what has happened to Washington, D.C. So the next 100 years is white men versus the brown girls. And I don't, not sure how that's going to play out. What I will tell you is the financial system is not doing what, remember Larry Kudlow, the CNBC guy, like the super Reagan guy, he believed in King Dollar, and he's like the 80s guy. He's like the 80s mind. And why did I bring up? Oh, he loved to use this word capital formation. And for this conversation, I'm suggesting we give that credence. We take that very, very seriously. Is America really involved in capital formation? Well, yeah, we're spending $1 trillion on AI. Okay, well, the question becomes, is that the formation of cap? You can spend $1 trillion on a lot of things. You can spend $1 trillion on porn and it'll grow the economy, but is that really capital formation? You follow me? Like just spending money, making the stock market go up, that's not capital formation. And I think this is maybe like my postscript kind of a thing, that all this talk about the trillions and trillions and the missiles, and we can't even, like, I went to fucking Whole Foods this morning. Like, I don't think there was a piece of beef for less than $10 a pound. And it's just going to go up, people. Like, if you look at the droughts and everything, like, I'm telling you, like, beef in the United States, the founding fathers, if you like shook them out of their graves and said, one day in America, it's going to be $4 of minimum wage to buy, I shouldn't say $4, but like, it's going to be like $100 a pound for steak. Yeah, that's a good way to describe how African American people lived in the 19th century. Like, they didn't get steak, right? That's what all these policies of the white male conservative thingy is. They're recreating the antebellum South. That's why I played AOC and Spencer Pratt and the other woman. None of these things are creating capital. Okay, let's go to the next thing. We all know, from the Masons to the Club of Rome to Bill Gates to Kamala Harris, that all these people are depopulation advocates. They want people to be killed and die and bad things happen to them. Like, our internal leadership sort of wants us all to die. Both teams, both sides. So I think Kamala Harris, I'll finish with this. Kamala Harris talked about, I'm not going to play the video, but you're welcome to go look at it. And I usually beat up on her because she's so fun to make. I grew up in a house and we cut the grass. Right? It's just so much fun. It's almost as much as fun as losery run, loser. You know, it's just sort of silly. It's one of the other things I wanted to say about those 3 clips that I played and what I think is going to happen for the next 100 years. As Bismarck said, sometimes it comes down to blood and iron. But let's all calm down. Humans have to create narratives for themselves. There's no ideological formulaic bullshit out of this. Mark Faber is the fucking my favorite economist for this one sentence. He said, it doesn't matter what the system is, but there has to be a system. That is just, and he's like a dyed-in-the-wool Austrian, like savage capitalist, but not so savage that you Gaza people. And he's in Asia, by the way. And look at Asia. This whole conversation tonight, the next 100 years, isn't about the globe. It's about the West. There's nobody in Asia fighting. Japanese and Chinese people have let their bygones be bygones. The Muslims in Singapore, it's illegal to even not criticize, but to offend another religion. In Singapore, if you go up and you go, you fucking Muslims, you get arrested and caned, I think. Right? Look at what's happening in this country with both sides, especially on the case of Zionism, right? According to Mark Levin, like all Muslims are terrorists. And the problem is, if you've really been doing your homework toward the war on terror, all those terrorists are trained by the West. They're Takfiris. I think that's how you pronounce it. Muslims don't even recognize the like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, Al-Nusra. They don't even, like, they have their own ideas about like just war, and like the Catholic traditions call it just war. They call it jihad. They don't even recognize those people as part of the Mujahideen. In other words, part of the they don't even really see them as Muslim warriors. They see them as some sort of, Sheikh Imran Hussein calls them, what's he call them? Dajjal's warriors, like the soldiers of Antichrist, he calls them. The next 100 years, this whole problem that I'm laying out for you is the West. Look at the UK. The UK is over. I don't think the UK will ever be put back together again. I think terrible things will happen there, and I don't wish it on anybody. This is my point. So I don't want to give a eulogy for democracy. That's not really what I'm trying to accomplish here. That's sort of the J.D. Vance thing, right? Like, we become a Catholic. He's not a Catholic. He's a fat ass. We harvest this Catholic vibe, and we use this as justification to say things like, why do we have our government being run by single women, by cat women, or what do you say, cat ladies, or single cat? I mean, real misogynist bullshit. But they want to get that deep conservative roots that come out of the Catholic Church to justify their cartoonish conservative cultural war. The next 100 years at best is going to be a combination of all those people I played tonight. And all those narratives are going to have to wrestle with each other, ideally in the best way possible, right? So if you go back and you study the Civil War, what do you walk away with? You walk away with Lincoln's narratives. I don't follow you. Yeah, we won Gettysburg and Vicksburg. But to the degree that we won is because we all learned the Gettysburg Address in 4th grade, and it sort of took over our brain, right? You get the idea. So we're going to have a battle of narratives at best. At worst, we are now in the Francisco War. I made that up myself. I like to make shit up. We are now, Francisca's is this little tomahawk-looking thing that the people of France, the Franks, were named after. A little throwing axe. And I think it's on Zero Hedge today. I think there's a $99,000 missile package that you can buy on Temu that can take down an aircraft carrier. I think that's on Zero Hedge right now. There's a $100,000 missile that can take down a $7 billion aircraft carrier. That's what I'm saying about the Franciscas. But the military domination of, like, Top Gun, that people my age grew up with, it's gone. It's one of the other things that just went away in the last 6 weeks. We don't have any military domination of Iran. We blew up their air force. They didn't have a fucking air force. We blew up their navy. No, we didn't. Their navy's in a tunnel underneath the mountains. The people running the war don't even know what the war is. They're like a drunk guy at the bar shouting at the NFL football coach, like, okay, you're just a drunk guy at the bar. What the fuck do you know about football? Well, I played back in you know what I mean? Like that whole thing of like Hegseth and Trump and JD Vance and Rubio and they don't even know what this war is. They don't even really understand the missiles and the thing and the tactics and the strategic this, that, and the other thing. I mean, I'm not sure that any of us really do. Or the war was created to create a kind of entropic stalemate where we're just going to just blow each other up, which again leads me to my thesis of this is 100. We have to start thinking about like the next 100 years in the Western world. Probably more so than like people of Latin America have had to think about the next 100 years, through the Cold War, through the CIA, through all the assassinations and communism, like, just the horror of never ending third world as the battlefield, like finally they get their head out of it and they've created this BRICS phenomenon. The real battlefield, I think, is here. It's in the tech. And it's the Franciscas. I think the future is you're going to need certain kinds of like digital weapons. I mean, think of all of us that have left. Mizrahi said he's going to leave YouTube. I left TikTok, and although it was fun to have this big population of people responding to me, it really wasn't doing anything. And now we've like advanced into Substack is a very, pun intended, substantial platform. I mean, you can get on and read Shanaka every morning, and there's no reason to even listen to the cable TV or the Wall Street Journal or anything. There's a guy for free in Australia named Shanaka Hanson Pereira. Just like, I like to say, Shanaka the cover off the ball. So that's an example of like a Francisco is like a little digital weapon in this big propaganda. Larry Ellison's taken over TikTok and Barry Weiss has taken over like a third of all American media, which nobody fucking watches anymore anyways. But this is what the battle of the next 100 years looks like. It'll all be on a framework built by, like we built the internet, right? And we all sort of know the internet is open and free and not. But all the world's a stage. So it's going to be a battle of ideas, a battle of narratives. You can check your ideology at the door. When you look at like Los Angeles, like, and, maybe AOC would have say this about Los Angeles and Spencer Pratt would say this about Los Angeles. And there's just these problems of Los Angeles. There's no formulaic thing to drop down on Los Angeles and everything just like crystallizes into wonderfulness. All right. Life just isn't that easy. Now, where we're at a bit of a disadvantage is because of I'll wind down with this, I'm going to call this like the Luciferian perspective. That we have the better perspective because we think we have the better perspective. We are the most confident, which is in itself an important ingredient. Like you could think about like I don't know, like a great fighter like Muhammad Ali or something like that. It's a subtle difference there. You have to have tremendous confidence to move forward with something, but right on the other side, it can be like overconfidence. And we've just decided to sign off really both parties, like the luxury liberal woke people and the Trump people have this in common. They're Luciferian. They think their way is the only fucking way. Nowhere in America is any of it working. And that's why I played all these different people. I would go further. I would say the most thoughtful guy in North America is a comedian, Tim Dillon. And that's telling you how fucked up it is. Nobody has any idea of what to do. Or Tim Dillon was the guy that says they're trying to turn AI, they're building a demon. It's an absolutely brilliant one-liner. It's absolutely like, I haven't read anything that's like one line that explains the absurdity of the AGI, artificial general intelligence. You know, Frankenstein is going to get up off his bed and walk through the village and whatever. Better than that one. But we have a real problem in that the West has no piety. So I'm going to finish up with my nun thing. Nobody respects the internal, the private, the thing that really belongs to you. If it and this is a problem of like social media and democracy, that the only thing that has value is that which draws the most eyeballs and the most attention. And if you believe in democracy, you sort of have to believe that whoever garners the most eyeballs and the best polls, and there's no place for piety in that. There's no Emily Dickinson in her room for 25 years writing poetry. It was just all at the foot of her bed and nobody even knew about it until they opened up the thing when she was dead. And people were like, what? Like, where does this even come from? Everything's just shallow and immediate. And whether it's Trump and like his Truth Social, loser Iran, or the Attorney General, like, so they're eating kids. Fuck it. The stock market's at an all-time high. Like the fact that would even occupy some part of the American experience is just something to sit back and think about for a moment. So I'll leave you with this because I've had a nice time on here. And I think my role in the universe is to go into more of a business technology capital formation thing and less about like these big 1,000-year things, although I really enjoy doing it and people give me lots of good feedback and everything. But long ago, I've told the story a couple times on here. My dad was at a cocktail party or something, and there was a nun who said, "Oh, what's your son studying at Yale?" And he said, "Philosophy." And without missing a beat, she said, "Good. Someday we're going to need them." So we're all going to need a little bit of philosophy because we're all going to need to get over the thing that propaganda does in a Luciferian system. It makes everybody believe that their bullshit, their ideology will work, and all the problems are being caused by people who are not going along with your personal ideology. And really, this is just a function of narcissism. And we are literally lobotomized. We're like Leonardo DiCaprio at the end of Shutter Island because of it. So the next 100 years for America is not going to look like the last 100 years. Quite the contrary. It's probably going to pick your favorite movie, Rocky, or, Miles Davis quit using heroin and like started to swim, and David Bowie quit doing drugs and like took it's part, or Tiger Woods like came back from all his. We're in like the Great Reset. We're in the fourth turning. The fourth turning guys perfectly explained this to us. Everything that's happening everywhere you look in the West is destructive. Finance, interest rates, missile attacks, publicity, everything is destructive on both sides. And we really haven't even had a conversation about, like, I'm going to use the word reconstruction because it's like such a key word from the Civil War, because that's like one of my theses here. We're going to have to go through like a second religiousness, like a second political revolution thing. Not in just like a shallow, that's like a nice thing to say on C-SPAN, but like we're going to have to go through like a complete reconstruction of how America even works. From a dozen eggs to Kamala Harris, I guess, was in a convenience store or something, and there was a black woman who takes care of 3 kids on minimum wage or below and a little bit of public assistance. I think she has $150 to buy food, and she said, I just eat the kids' leftovers. This isn't a nation with 10 feet of topsoil. But the best part is that she said the water in Jackson, Mississippi is sometimes so brown that not only will I not let the children drink the water, I won't even let them bathe in it. That's where America is. Now, again, the depopulationists want this to happen. They want the stress in the system. They want the COVID kind of misallocation of resources. They openly talk about it. So if some poor black people in Jackson, Mississippi don't have access to water, good. Look at Gaza. We're all Palestinians now.